Hi, my name is Scott. Woke up today at 8:58 for a 9 a.m. call, and that was a little hustle and bustle. Had a lot of other things pop up, and ended up not being able to hot tub today in the morning, which is something I was looking forward to. Instead, I'm relegated to hot tubbing at 1 p.m., but more likely 5 p.m. like a normal person. Stoked.
Well, we said to submit voice memos, and that is what we got. Scott, you are a legend, my man. That put a smile on my face. If anyone else wants to send in a voice memo, just bust out your phone. Let me know who you are, where you're listening from, some details about your surroundings. Record it on voice memos and send it to podcast@mudwtr.com. If we play it, we will send you a box of mud. Welcome to Trends with Benefits. My name is Kyle Tierman, and this is an episode with Shane Heath, the founder and CEO of MUD WTR, also a close childhood friend of mine. In this episode, we get into Shane's childhood, significant events in his life, and the inception of MUD WTR. We're going to be doing these episodes every so often to give you a behind-the-curtain look at MUD WTR. It's a great excuse for us to talk shit, have a few laughs. Shane is he's one of those dudes who I always knew was going to do something big with his life, and I've felt that our friendship was always based on humor and ideas. So I'm grateful to be working with him now in this capacity, and this podcast just fucking flowed. I've been doing podcasts for 4 years now, maybe 5. And after this one, I stood up and I was like, dude, I'm not just saying this. That was a sick podcast. So I hope that you all agree. And please welcome to the show the founder and CEO of MUD WTR, Shane Heath.
Have you ever been scuba diving?
No.
Dude, it's pretty awesome.
It terrifies me.
Does it?
No. I'd like to scuba dive.
How could that terrify
I'm just
you?
kidding.
You go that deep free diving.
Nothing makes me afraid.
Dude, I saw a lobster that was as big as a medium-sized dog. I'm not kidding. It was this long and was that tall, just posting up.
Oh, they're terrifying.
It was nuts.
Terrifying
dude. Full
creatures.
Alien.
Yeah. Have you seen The Octopus Teacher?
Fucking love that movie.
It's the best movie ever. Oh, it's so good.
Ugh, I thought he was gonna bang that thing.
Yeah.
I was like,
it's gonna go down.
What is this rated?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
people are getting real lonely up in the Northwest.
Well, it was cool to see how
No, it was beautiful.
what a great movie you can make out of just one scene. Right? Like we're so fascinated with traveling all around the world to experience different cultures, and the story needs to be so dynamic. But this dude's going to the same cove every single day, and he's experiencing this entire renaissance of mind. He's experiencing culture in a completely different way. The way he sees his own family changes because of this relationship to an octopus.
It's like the fractal nature of everything, right? Like you can look at the universe and then you can see similarities in the universe in the microbiome and the molecular structure or the plants, and you really don't need to go too far.
Yeah, keep
it simple.
To see the universe in a grain of sand and eternity in an hour. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Indeed. Perception is all we have here, and we've been upgrading our drugs to breathwork sessions here. I think we should have this be a consistent theme of the pod. Do a round of 11. Mm-hmm. Do you do breathwork every day?
No. For a while I was. I was just doing kind of like that, 3 rounds of 11 breaths with a breath hold in between. And then I would use that, use that mental space that it would get me in. It seemed like it allowed me to cut through the fat of the little thoughts that were just ringing around my mind, and then I could meditate a lot more effectively, or a lot more quietly, I guess. Effective meditation, I don't know what that means, but it just felt a lot more I felt a lot more relaxed and clear-headed after that.
So let's go back to a time when you were not feeling clear-headed, Shane Heath. Tell me about the first time you smoked marijuana.
Yeah, it's kind of where
Let's start at the beginning of the
exploration
beginning.
of who Shane is really began. I mean, the first time I smoked marijuana, it wasn't really anything to talk about. It was like me and Josh McDonald got like an old shampoo bottle and drilled in like a ballpoint pen and made like a bong out of it somehow, and we got some hits off of it. It was much more about the experience of making it than, I don't even know if we got high. Like, I don't think we even knew.
Just got some carcinogenic exposure. If you ever come down with cancer, you can be like, yeah, it was all because of that first time.
L'Oreal.
Yeah.
How dare you.
Just smoking plastics.
But yeah, we were just like exploring, just seeing what was out there. And it was probably like a couple months later. We were 14, like we were going into our freshman year. And it was 420. And we were all hanging out at my friend Ryan's house, and there's probably like 8 of us. And I was more into like building bongs than actually using them. And I'm not kidding. I built a 14-foot tall bong out of old like 2-liter soda bottles. I'm not kidding. And duct tape.
Of course.
And it was insane. Like, I would just like, top to bottom, just kind of put like duct tape them together. And we had like ice chambers for one, and like put like snacks in one, like the smoke would kind of get like Dorito flavor.
Oh, the ways we squander our creativity as children.
And like, it was so tall that I had to sit on the roof, and then somebody was down on the bottom floor lighting it, and it took like a minute to get the smoke to the top.
Yeah.
And then you get it to the top, and then everybody was like, clear it. And you try to like clear all the smoke out, and that's like a lot.
There were different atmospheres that the smoke had to go through.
That's like mini a child's lung, that I had to clear of smoke. And that was the first time I really smoked pot, like the L'Oreal bottle was one, and this was this like next level.
I farted smoke.
And so shortly after, I'm probably coughing and didn't even know what I was doing, like getting myself into, right? And I walked downstairs, and Ryan has an older sister who's like 4 years older than us, and she knows what's going on, and she also just loved like terrorizing us. There was no parents here, and she comes in, she's like, Ryan, what's that smell? And all of a sudden, like, I walk down the stairs and I see her, and I'm like, it just started to hit me, whatever that meant. I didn't know what was going on, and I legit remember seeing her walk in the house and say Ryan like 2 times. Like, it happened, and then it happened again.
It's like the cat
like
in the Matrix.
I saw it all happen twice, and I was like,
deja vu.
It was full on like lived out deja vu, vivid, and like everything just turned to slow-mo, and like I just felt separated from reality, kind of like I didn't know who I was anymore, really. Like ego death kind of as a 14-year-old kid. And I remember running into the bathroom and throwing water on my face. Like, what is happening? And I went to my friend Frank, and I was like, dude, like I feel weird, man. I feel weird. Like, I was so scared. Like I was like kind of crying, like, but like when nobody was looking.
You're kind of crying now, man.
Yeah,
It's taking you back there.
It was nuts, dude. And she was like running around the house, like chasing us, and like pissed, like get the fuck out. And we all had to leave. And I think I was the only one who got like a 14-foot tall bong hit in. And we're all like riding down to Capitola Village. And I'm like, dude, this is not cool. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to be the same.
You're like riding a bike. You're like, do bikes still exist when we're not using them?
Yeah, it just felt like a flood of all these really complex thoughts, and it felt very like interdimensional. Like everything felt fake, and I was like, like at that time, I didn't know that there was the possibility of consciousness to have that realm, of existence. Like I didn't know how to even talk about it or ask somebody in that moment, especially. I was just like, I felt very alone.
You don't have the words to even ask those questions.
And like, because of that, I was just like internally like processing it all. And like, even after like I remember we went over to my friend's house and I was like, I still feel so weird, dude. And he was just like, dude, have some Cheez-Its.
Have
like,
some more weed, man. Here, have this pot brownie. It'll help.
Yeah, he's just like laughing, you know, and he's like 14. And then I started to feel kind of back to normal-ish, but like I still could recall what I just had experienced. And I was so confused by it because I didn't know what pot did at all, you know? And I was just like, I don't, like what I experienced, like, I'm not sure if that's what pot's all about. Like maybe I just like messed myself. Like I just had so many questions. Like, did I do too much? Am I ever going to be the same? Like,
is this permanent?
Like who can explain to me what just happened to? Who do I ask?
Best question you can ever ask yourself while having a terrifying psychedelic or weed experience.
Will
this ever stop?
Will it ever stop?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no like video game reset
That's
button.
what they tell, what the therapists say at the Zendo at Burning Man. This is permanent.
Yeah, for sure. And then I started to feel this kind of like claustrophobia around like not being able to ask anybody because I didn't want to ask my parents because then I would be telling them that I smoked pot, you know. And it was probably like a week or two later, like I was just like I had so many interesting thoughts going through my mind just about like life and consciousness. Like if I could all of a sudden smoke some plant and it made everything feel fake and kind of gave me this perspective where I was like experiencing things in like where time felt different, like the fabric of reality changed. And I was like, what the fuck? Like I just had so many questions and I pretty much had like an anxiety attack at one point, like 2 weeks later, 14 years old, going into high school. And at that point I was like, Mom, I smoke pot and I feel really weird. And then after that, it was kind of cool because it opened up the dialogue. You know, it's not like I got like in trouble. My parents were very open. Like my dad, you know, was very open from an early age about like, look, I've done these things and I've had friends who've done these things and continue to do these things and here's how they turned out. And like, it wasn't like giving me false information, was just giving me like the real data. Like he had friends who died from overdoses. He had friends that were kind of still in the game, like all of that. So I had a lot of respect for it. And after that, it opened up the dialogue where I just started asking my parents a lot of questions, like existential questions about life.
Right. It's so important that you can have that kind of dialogue with your parents because when you can't about sex, drugs, anything quote unquote taboo, it just creates this separation. It creates this pressure cooker situation where all these thoughts just start to build in the kids' minds and they don't know that there is good information out there. They don't know that, hey, someone else may have also gone through this experience on planet Earth.
And that's exactly what I was experiencing. And it gave it like more power too. Like it was like, oh, like it's way worse. Yeah, it just was.
Yeah,
it was
because the loneliness makes it worse, right? That's such a huge part of spiraling out of control is when people feel like they don't have a community that can understand them. Yeah. So that was me. And even like when the dialogue opened and I could talk about it, it was still. Like nobody really has answers for a lot of that stuff, you know what I mean? Like, and my parents, I grew up in like a Christian family. And so there was a lot that was kind of like where some of the conversations would like, that couldn't be answered would lead to. It's just kind of like, just pray. And which is like, that's cool. But like, I love studying religion and everything, but that just opened up more questions for me. Like it wasn't like an end all be all. Like it wasn't comforting. And I pretty much just had to like ride it out for like a couple years, and like I was pretty anxious and like depressed, honestly. And then shortly after that, like 9/11 happened, and that kind of was a pretty intense experience as well. Like especially in the state I was currently in, because previous to having that like what I would call a psychedelic experience at 14, like life was pretty. It was pretty cool. It was pretty chill. You know, there wasn't a lot of questions. It was just like fun. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, there's all this other things that I can be thinking about and asking questions about. And then 9/11 happened and it
like, honestly, at that time, I felt like one anchor was like, I felt pretty safe. I felt like my parents knew what was going on a little bit, and then they kept me safe. And then the government, the country, like, I felt like we had a very safe country. And all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, maybe not. And
I'm almost picturing that huge bomb as a plane flying in and exploding your mind.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So between, that point when you started feeling anxious, did you could talk to your parents, did you keep any kind of journal or have any kind of creative outlet, or was it all just building inside your mind?
It was all just building inside my mind. Like, I remember going to sleep and just thinking about like intense things, like, all the time.
Over and over again? Did you have a lot of like
It was
thoughts
just kind
on
of like
repeat?
thoughts exploring. And then I remember when I was probably like 15 or so, I started to think about like manifesting, kind of like, I didn't know anything about it, but I was like, I wonder if I can control my thoughts. Like, I saw how my thoughts were making me feel. Like, I started to see that, like, when I think these thoughts, I feel this way. And then I was like, what if I think these other thoughts? And then how do I feel? Like, I was kind of like curing myself almost, like, of like trying to think about what I wanted to think about what I wanted to bring into the world, kind of a thing, like, at a pretty young age, because it was almost like out of survival, like, I was just like, it didn't feel like a lot of my friends were going.
Right.
And I mean, maybe I did have friends who were going with similar feelings, but like, we were 14, 15, like, we weren't talking about things, right? So I felt like I was at school and I was looking around and I would have fun. I had great friends. I was like in the cool kids crew and everything, but like inside, like, I felt really different. Like, I was like, I don't think anybody's thinking these thoughts that I'm thinking, like asking these questions that I'm asking, but I would just kind of try to like get along, like move along and playing water polo, like surfing, hanging out with the crew.
It sounds like you had to build some kind of tool set.
I had to build my own internal tool set.
If you didn't, you might go crazy.
Exactly. And I kind of did, right? And then
do you remember any moment when you like realized, okay, I actually have the power to control where I point my attention, almost like some kind of laser pointer? Was there any situation that happened like that?
I mean, even when I was starting to, like, I remember going to sleep and I would essentially lie in bed for like an hour and just think about these things. And then I started to like spend conscious time, like thinking about good things and just like almost going into like a Joe Dispenza type meditation on it. Like, I didn't know I had never heard the word meditation or any of these
Joe
things.
Dispenza wrote, You Are the Placebo.
You Are the Placebo, yeah. And where he's kind of like putting himself in a malleable mindset and sort of like manifesting different feelings and healing, whatever. But yeah, I kind of felt like I had to build my own tool set that could help with that, help me cope. And then just like time away from the experience, I think, helps as well. And then just growing up and having more almost distraction in a sense, because I wasn't really getting answers. And I also didn't feel like I had a community that I could communicate with that could like make me feel good. So I almost had to like push it aside, right, until eventually later. But push it aside for like years, really.
Love it when you just lock shit up.
Locked it up.
Love it.
I mean, but it did give me these tools, right? That like from a very young age, like I used, and it was always, in the back of my mind, I would like think about things or see certain people, like wonder if maybe they were kind of having similar explorations or thoughts or realizations, but there wasn't any sort of like, nothing was cultivated that would inspire a conversation like that in our friend group at that time.
How did the death of your friend in high school impact you?
Yeah, so I was 17, I was 16, and I had some friends at different high schools, and this one was Brendan Stewart, and my dad is a builder, and his partner, this is his son. So we sort of like grew up together at job sites and everything, and we would have like company trips, family trips, that type of thing. So he was like one of my best friends for sure. And as we grew up, him and I got really into snowboarding. His dad had a cabin, so we would go up all the time. And one trip we went up over, it was like right after Christmas, and we were going to stay through the New Year. And my parents at the time were traveling up to Seattle, and it was amazing snow. Like we were scoring like 3 feet deep powder and loving it. And it was like, I think it was maybe like the day before New Year's Eve, and somebody who we were with was going back to Santa Cruz. And my thinking was like, my parents are out of town. I got great snow, and I want to go home and throw a party at my house. And so I did that. And Brandon was like, no, I'm staying up. It's too good, and it's going to snow 2 more feet tomorrow. I'm like, totally get it. And I go home, and the next day I'm like organizing this party, and I get a phone call from my dad, and they're like, we're flying home from Seattle, and Brendan passed away. Snowboarding, fell into a tree well. Supposedly he was like going off this jump, and he tried a backflip, and I mean his dad was with him. It was just him and his dad out there like in the trees, and just scoring, probably having the best day ever, which is great, you know. But yeah, his dad went to the bottom of the ski run, and Brandon wasn't there, and they found him like 2 hours later. And yeah, so that was also a very mind altering event, right? Like all of a sudden everything felt fake. Like it was just like complete shock. Like I was just like, you don't really think that can happen. You don't like think about that all the time, you know? Especially when you're young, that like all of a sudden your best friend could just be like that you'd talked to earlier that day that was like, it's 3 feet deep. And then I can't text him back. So it was almost like, you know, I would have periods of sort of forgetting some of these like existential questions and some of this like depth that maybe I had in me kind of from that initial psychedelic experience, but probably things that like most of us have access to throughout our lives, hopefully in smaller doses hopefully they get built up in smaller doses. But like traumatic experiences like that sort of brought back a lot of that thinking, where I would just be like, oh boy, like there's still a lot of questions I have, you know. It would remove those distractions and force me to look there. And it happened again later when I was in college. You know, I see my life in like these periods where I have these like really deep explorations that are sort of like unavoidable and bring about a lot of internal growth within me, but they're almost like so intense I have to like take a break from them. And at the time I had a long break because I went to San Diego State, and I was, you know, studying but also having a ton of fun outside of school. I lived on the beach in Mission Beach and had some great friends, and we were all, you know, it was like I was doing really well in school, but on the weekends it was like beer pong and surfing and playing in the sand and everything. And we had kind of like an alleyway, and there was three different houses, and we were all friends. All of us were homies. We would kind of switch off, throwing like the pregame parties. And one of the tenants in the home, his name is Adam. He's from here. Amazing. He's like professional skimboarder, brilliant mind, a couple years older than me, and I didn't grow up knowing him, so I met him when I moved in, but he was friends of my roommate. And we would all of us would hang out. But like as the semester went on, we started just to notice, like when we were hanging out, like Adam kind of weird when he would drink, but like we weren't hyper aware of this. Like, I mean, we didn't know how to like think about that. We were kind of like, yeah, Adam's weird. He's super smart. He's like a genius kid. And like it kept getting like a little worse and a little worse, where he would talk about things with like his involvement with the government and things, but he was like studying some, I think like microchip technology in school, getting his PhD. And I was like, maybe he is. Like, I have no idea. And we all go home for Thanksgiving, and we come back and we find that he had committed suicide. And that for me was kind of like, I guess like the last straw for ignoring some of these things about myself. 'Cause it wasn't that, like, I did feel a little bit of guilt, right? Like I was like, we are like young, dumb college kids and like not aware of what's going on around us, and the potential for somebody like asking for help in like subliminal ways was very obvious to me and something that I never wanted to happen again. And that made me like at that time also, like I had like an ex-girlfriend who, you know, right then I found out she was like dating some guy who owned restaurants and was like older and kind of killing it. And I was just like, who am I, dude? I'm a loser, you know? Like I'm just like following the sheep through this college experience. And I know that, like, I know that I have so much more like depth in me than like so many questions that I could be searching out and answering and potentially helping people or potentially preventing bad things from happening. And so like pretty much overnight, I changed my life right then. Like it was, I started to get into meditation. I joined a yoga class, like little things started, which those little things, like given the environment I was in, were like really weird, you know, like I was hanging out with kids that were crushing Keystone Lights and eating pizza, and I was still hanging out with them, but I was doing like Ayurvedic cleanses and training jiu-jitsu and like living really active life, and started painting, like set up an art studio in our garage, and they were just like, what the fuck happened to Shane? But I mean, I was still like, I felt more like myself than I'd ever before. Like it wasn't like, I had no fear of being weird. I'm like, fuck this. Like, I'm not going to not be myself any longer. You know what I mean?
Had you been painting before?
I mean, just in school. Like, I'd go to art classes and I would do well. And I had a couple moments in school where I got like taken into that flow, that state where I was like, this is different. Like, I would just be like lost for like hours, you know? And I was like, that felt amazing. But
yeah, your perception of time changes.
Yeah, but then it was like, we got a beer pong game 2 hours later. So it wasn't like I would go to school and then I never had bought a canvas outside of the classroom, put it that way. And so finally, then I bought a canvas and I was like, dude, I can just paint at home, like whenever I want. And that was like a silly but like huge transition for me. And I just set up an art studio, and then I just started to like see how far I could step into my own human like experience and existence and see how that felt. And the more I did that, the more I noticed that like there was nothing to fear all along. There was no reason to not be doing that all along, right?
What did your first art studio look like?
We had a garage in Mission Beach. It was like half covered. It was covered by the structure above, but there was like open air. There was like mold in there. We parked a jet ski in it, surfboards, but my dad helped me build an easel, and got some paints. We had concrete floor. It was super cold. I'd have to wear like gloves some mornings. Yeah,
just gloves with your paintbrush.
Yeah.
And then what kind of paint set did you get? Do you remember?
It was just like, I was painting at that time with just acrylics and just like off the shelf brushes.
Just
like a brush
did
pack.
you go to the store and had you taken art classes?
So I was taking painting classes at the time.
At college.
Yeah, I was taking like a figure drawing class, and then that extended into a figure painting class. And then I was also taking, it was like a 3-dimensional rendering class. So kind of like Pixar type stuff. So on the computer, digital, which was probably the biggest contributor to my painting in a way, because it basically breaks down the form, whatever you're looking at, could be a sphere or a human face, into like shapes, like smaller shapes, and you can see how light refracts on it. You can move light sources within the environment. And so it allowed me to like see how a 3-dimensional object could be viewed on a 2-dimensional screen. And then I kind of took that and like it really helped me render faces better and eyes.
Was there something about drawing figures that drew you to it in particular?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I don't know. I remember hearing that drawing hands is like the hardest thing to draw. And so I wanted to learn how to draw the hardest thing, and faces similarly. And so that was kind of took me into there. I'm sure I can like pull out some things probably more like subconscious about like, I really enjoy painting eyes. Like I don't know if I've like thought about why that is, but I'm sure there's a reason. And I don't know if I even want to know like how to verbalize that reason. There's
Sure.
like something special about that connection, right? But
It can make the experience smaller. Sometimes it's like when you're talking about like an ayahuasca experience or something.
The magic, right?
Removes the sacredness. Yeah.
But there is something that always drew me to paint figures, and I love painting eyes.
Right.
So, yeah.
And why did you go for the hardest thing first?
I don't know why I did it, but I admire like my dad. I'm sure there was like some influence there. Like he taught me, I'd say like my best skill set is my work ethic, and that's taught to me by him, and like, or maybe just like given to me through, brought down.
It normalized it. You grew up in that culture.
I grew up in an environment where my dad built all the homes that I grew up in. You know, like we would move into homes sometimes, and they would be like, you know, they're beautiful, like amazing homes, but there's still like unfinished parts. And my dad would be working all week, and then he'd be like at night finishing everything, and then even once the house is done, just like constantly like a madman. You know, like planting the garden in the back, like with the weed blower, keeping it all nice. You know, like it was constant hard work. And
he also built the Coconut Club.
Built the Coconut Club.
The bar in the back of my yard.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of him and myself now. Like the more I grow up, because like you could like put him on an idea. Like I remember I wanted to remember Deer Camp.
Of course.
So I lived at a place here in SoCal, and we had like an acre of property. It was just like, but it was right in town. It was such a special piece of land, and I wanted to build a little spot where I can paint, like a little studio. And me and Greg Watts and Tyler McCall, like definitely not builders, were like,
these are pro mountain bikers.
Yeah, I asked my dad for a little advice on building this thing, and then we were like, okay, cool, but like we were just gonna do it pretty ghetto. You know, we had no idea really what we were doing, but we felt like we could build like a something that had a roof on it, and then I was like, Dad, you want to cruise over and like just double check? And then once he came over, it was just on, and the thing was built like to code, and like it took a little longer. It was more expensive than originally, but that thing is like still like you just get him on something, and he just will do it right and put in the work, and like
he has a strong handshake.
He does. Yeah.
Fierce grip.
Python arms. Dude.
I get a little weak in the knees.
Yeah, but I think that like I never wanted to shy away from hard work, and he always taught me that hard work pays off. And like thinking about like, okay, if I want to learn how to paint things, like start there, and like everything else will be easier. And that's kind of something he taught me.
So when you stopped being afraid of your weirdness and your funk, what started happening in your life? What were the series of events that unfolded?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was like my senior year in college. I remember one time it was like Cinco de Mayo, and we all like, I was still doing like, we're going to go to Tahoe with my friends that I was living with at the time. Like I'm still best friends with them. It was just like, I was able just to do my own thing within that ecosystem. But like, I remember it was Cinco de Mayo one time, and like I was doing this like Ayurveda yoga reset cleanse or something, like, and doing these like deep like meditations, and I was just like I was just super into exploring my consciousness. And it was like, whereas before maybe I was it would kind of like hit me at night because I wasn't like facing it. Now I was like facing it head on, and it felt really good. Like all those like thoughts that I was having after that initial 12-foot bong experience. And I remember like, this is kind of like what I look back on is like, I really was like starting to go out on my own. Cause I was like dressed up as a mariachi band with everybody, and like they were all drinking like Keystone Lights, and I was drinking some like,
I was part of that mariachi band.
Bark
and
tea.
I have a photo of that.
Were you down there that time?
Yeah.
No, we were mariachi multiple times.
Multiple offensive costumes went down.
We don't do that anymore. We've learned. But yeah, so that was that. I remember going to my first music festival that year, and like going to this Do Lab event, and Do Lab runs Lightning in a Bottle, and I remember seeing
Lightning in a Bottle is a festival that takes place
music
on the Central Coast.
Yep, art and music festival, and that time, that was the first time I did mushrooms. So I went to this music festival, and somebody gave me mushrooms. It was at Coachella, right? First time music festival, first time Coachella, first time mushrooms. We hadn't even walked into the venue yet, and I took some mushrooms and then started to walk in with my friend, and like the trees were just like breathing. And we walk in, and the way that there's like multiple entrances, and they all kind of funnel into one zone where they search you and check you before you go and check your tickets. And we walk into the entrance in front of us, and we somehow walked out and the other entrance instead of going into the actual festival. And that's when it started to get really sketchy. Like we walk in an entrance and somehow didn't walk through like where they search you. We ended up walking out of another entrance to another area, and we were just like, is this the fest? Like we were super lost, and then we were like, oh no.
We're in Wayne's basement, but this isn't Wayne's basement.
Yeah, that was hilarious, but like that's when it started to get real weird. And then finally like figured our way in, and it was just like overload of people. And I just remember like it seemed like everybody was making eye contact with me, and everybody like was like, he's high. And I was just like, this fucked. I just wanted to run. And we ended up finding solace in this place called the Do Lab, which I didn't know what it was, but it was kind of like Coachella has a bunch of like big white tents that are, I don't know, kind of like sterile environments. And the Do Lab had this like crazy looking tent. They were like spraying misters everywhere, and they had like 20 king size Tempur-Pedic beds under shade in this zone. And I was like, I'm chilling here for a little bit, just getting my bearings. And that's what I did. And ended up like chilling there for a couple hours. It was like really amazing music, and it ended up kind of coming down from that initial anxiety and like feeling into the environment. And then I just felt like I felt amazing, and just like ran off from my friends and just like went on my own program all day, and came back to the Do Lab at night and saw this artist. His name's Eskimo. I didn't know who he was at the time. This is a producer playing music, and it was like, it's the like check out Eskimo. It's the weirdest music.
How do you spell that?
ESKMO. It's like, it's not dubstep, but it's like really abstract. Like he was performing it live, but it was all electronic. And he's in court, like he would bring on like a shovel on stage and like tap it with a spoon, and then like mix that into the beat and like crinkle a water bottle, and that'd be like the snare, and like making these wild beats. And they're spraying everybody with water, and there's like mud on the ground, and everybody's like like I felt like I was marching through some like jungle, like I was like a tribal warrior. It was wild. And then I looked to my right, and there's a live artist painting. His name's John Park, who I got to meet like years later. And I stopped kind of dancing, and I just was like watching this guy paint. And this was like right after I bought like my first canvas and was kind of like exploring art more. And I watched him paint for like 2 hours, and I was just like, I want to do this. Like I want to paint live specifically. And I really want to paint like a lot. And the next year I painted live, like alongside him.
One of the coolest aspects of festivals are the live paintings.
Yeah, it's cool.
Like that kind of co-creation where there's music and art, and you're in this kind of alternate universe, whether it's Burning Man or Lightning in a Bottle. It's not sterile America. You know, you don't need to feel like a weirdo in your room in this kind of plasticized culture. Like you can be in this strange alternate universe as you're painting anything as weird as you want.
Yeah, there's something cool about the environment. Seems to be like coming to life as you're there. Like so many events you go to, it's like you show up and you just expect it to be like perfect and done. Right. And there's something organic about that, where you're like, you show up it's like a 4-day festival, and you look at it, it's like different. Like every piece is different. There's different stages. That's like Lightning in a Bottle is like that in a lot of ways, the whole festival.
So a year later.
Yeah. So, I mean, that whole experience was amazing, right? And I took that and I started painting a ton, and ended up applying for live painting at Lightning in a Bottle, and I was painting the next year.
How do you apply?
You just go through, there's a website, apply. But yeah, you submit,
say, I'm an artist.
You submit some work. They ask you a couple questions like, why you, or why Lightning in a Bottle? Like, have you ever been to a festival? Have you ever painted live? And I hadn't. But I think I made it as like an alternate or something.
Yeah, I'm on the alternate list.
There was like at the time the artist outline, like I had no business being there. Like I'd never finished a painting at that point. Like literally never sold a painting, never finished a painting. But I had painted a lot of paint. Like I'd painted a kind of a lot over the course of that year. Like I was definitely like going for it. And had something to show and was like really passionate, right? But yeah, it was wild because the next year, like he was painting like next to me, that artist that I saw originally. And
what was his name?
John Park.
John Park.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is at Lightning in a Bottle.
Yeah.
And were you forced to finish a painting at Lightning in a Bottle?
I mean, forced is probably a strong word, but yeah, like you're getting invited to paint there, and then they host like a really amazing like outdoor art gallery at the end, and like the contribution is like you do a split, like a gallery split with the festival, and so it's like a revenue stream for the festival, and obviously like an experiential improvement to the festival, but they're not looking for people who are just going out there to like get a free ticket and like paint here and there.
Yeah, you want it to be good, and you're next to this artist who you respect, so you want your shit to be good.
Yeah, so I showed up like early and like started the painting. I was like, I'm so scared.
Do you remember what the painting was?
It was like this kind of like, it was a full figure body warrior kind of woman, like in this really cool pose, black and white, with different patterns on it, and it ended up selling
at the gallery at the end. So you split the profit with LIB.
With LIB, yeah. It was pretty awesome, and then I met like a lot of artists there too that I'm still friends with today. But yeah, that festival was awesome because like I was just going through a lot of like insecurities for art, like with my art, like because art is an interesting process, and I think really prepared me for entrepreneurship because, especially live art, I guess, or I guess specifically live art, because you're basically putting out an incomplete product. So like, depending on your style, like the beginning of a painting can look like absolute dog shit. Like nobody will like it would just look like whatever, like a child's painting, or like you can't really tell what it is. And you have people like walking around who are like sober or high, and they're like, you know, you can like imagine what they're thinking. Like you get really in your head, and you're like, I don't want like their eyeballs like tarnishing my vision here.
Right. It's like writing with someone over your shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like, yeah, it's like a little, you get over the caring, right? Like it really, it helped like callous my confidence with art. So
that's
like
really interesting because when you're painting alone in a room, there's no one looking over your shoulder, but to actually have to do that with people coming by and watching you do it, I never thought about that.
Yeah, and it's the same thing for even like my other career is design, right? At that time, especially, it's very much like, okay, I hear the problem, or I hear like the request that whoever is asking for, they need a design project done. And then I go off in isolation and design it and then present it to the class and get a round of applause, you know? And it creates this kind of like reward mechanism where it's like, I believed and like I still am getting over this, where I do my best work in isolation and am able to present like a product and I've worked out the details and the kinks, versus like something like stand-up comedy that you've done where it's very much on the spot improv. Stand-up comedy, you come prepared.
It's different because
improv would be something.
One thing you told me when we were out in Montana together is that podcasting is a good edge for you to push.
Yeah.
Because we're putting it all out there in the moment. Whereas the difference between stand-up comedy or obviously there is some improv with stand-up comedy, but most of the time it's rehearsed. You've written something down, you've condensed the ideas, and now you're presenting it. Same with writing. Rewriting is the essence of writing, right? Painting.
And I love writing too.
Right.
Like writing, I found a lot of solace. Like I remember like one childhood memory that I think about a lot, that comes up a lot, is funny enough. So my dad trained jiu-jitsu growing up. He was training at one of like the first jiu-jitsu gyms in Santa Cruz, actually. Was probably one of the first purple belts in Santa Cruz, and got me and my sister into it. I was probably 8 or 9. My sister is 2 years younger. And like one time me and her were like wrestling around at the house, and my sister knew how to like pull my parents' strings a little bit, you know? as most younger siblings can figure out. And we were practicing some techniques, and she like cried and like got all just put up, I don't know, just basically got my dad to get pissed.
Got all little sistery.
Yeah, my dad ran into the room, was like, pick on someone your own size. And I was like, no, like you don't know what happened. And I was like trying to explain like these jujitsu techniques. I was trying, and like, but like every word I was like, and he was like, no, like yelling, like put me in my room. And like I felt like my voice like shut down, you know, like it was like, and I still am like digging myself out of that. But like what came out of that was I wrote a note. Like in the room, I felt so frustrated that I couldn't explain my side of the story, and I was getting punished for something that I felt like was undeserving, that I wrote this note, and my parents still have it. And it's like details out like I was passing her guard, and she was in side control, and I told her that she should tap, and she said, I don't want to tap. Like I was like all these things, like I had her in like a rear naked choke. Like these are jujitsu techniques, but I was like a 9-year-old kid. Like everything's misspelled, and I was trying, but you could like feel the frustration. Like in that.
It's the frustration of being a child.
But like I remember feeling so like once I wrote it down, I was like, whatever happens, at least like I got to express myself, and they get to like, they can hopefully read it,
I got to
like
express
outside of the environment that has all this emotion and charge in it. Like writing felt like such an amazing medium for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, go on.
The power of being able to say what you mean, in my experience, is the best feeling in the world. I had, Jody Armour, the criminal justice attorney, does a lot of work on race relations in this country. So he just wrote a new book that he wrote on a typewriter, this old typewriter that his father had. His father was falsely convicted of some crime and represented himself in the case. And this was the case was going to determine whether or not he was going to get a huge amount of time in prison. And Jody talked about his father sitting in a cell waiting for the trial with this typewriter, pounding on the keys, making his case for why he was innocent. So to think about the stakes of saying what you mean and how important the power of the word is, I always think about that story and that is typewriter.
Really cool.
Yeah. What influence have podcasts had on your life? Speaking of podcasts.
Yeah. So I guess going from that experience at Lightning in a Bottle, at that time I was living in Santa Cruz, and shortly after moved to Silicon Valley and had a pretty intense commute where I was commuting like an hour each way. Sometimes more actually. And like at that time I thought that was just like the worst thing ever. Like I was just like, this is such a waste of my life. But I was working for a pretty awesome company. I was getting paid really well finally. And I was learning a ton. So I did it. And I was commuting from San Francisco down to Mountain View. And oftentimes would take like the cow train and everything. And I would bring my bike, and I had to bike like 3 miles each way, get to work and everything. And I'm not sure what the first podcast I heard about, but I started hearing about this thing called podcasts, right? Like, and I didn't know what they were. Like, it's not like today. Like I didn't know what that meant. And I think the first style of podcast I heard about was kind of like an NPR, like mystery murder trial type thing. It wasn't like a free form conversation like this. It was very, it was almost like an audiobook in a podcast form, like a storytelling type thing. And I wasn't that into that. Like that didn't compel me too much. And then I somehow came across Joe Rogan, and I'm sure you're like, oh, whatever. But at the time it was like literally his 127th podcast. Like, so like, I didn't know what that was. His whole thing was nothing at that time. It was just
when they still had to hide smoking weed.
They were advertising for like those fleshlight things, like the dick dildo.
This is my friend Brian Redman.
They were just taking bongos.
Come on, guys.
And like something
fuck a fleshlight.
And I was like, this is awesome. Yeah. Like, this is cool.
Well, it's so real.
It was so real and raw, and that's what I wanted. But the episode that I heard that really made me realize podcasting was going to be part of my life for a long time was episode 127. It was with Aubrey Marcus, who's the founder of On It, but at the time he was the founder of The Fleshlight, which is like, I don't even know if we want to talk about it. Some of you feel on your ding dong.
just look it up, guys.
Yeah. So this podcast was recorded after Aubrey Marcus's first, I believe it was his first ayahuasca experience in Peru, and 3-hour episode like they normally are, which was also very differentiating from other things that I'd heard.
And it's also before a lot of people had heard about ayahuasca,
yeah.
right? This is what,
I never heard about
10 years ago, maybe? There's been a big cultural shift in the way that ayahuasca has made its way into our consciousness.
Around 8 years ago, probably, yeah. So never heard about ayahuasca, but Aubrey Marcus is an amazing speaker about a lot of these types of things. He can get pretty, he can paint a beautiful picture, right? He's into poetry and he is pretty elaborate. And that was exactly what I needed to like further my own exploration, where previous, like there was a lot of things that still, I just didn't feel like I had a community. I didn't have anyone to bring up these topics about like life, what I had experienced when I smoked too much pot, like any of that realm, the spirit world. It was like people who I could talk to about like spirituality, like they had like a bias towards one religion, right? And so it made it really like I just couldn't go too far. And Aubrey was talking about like all of that. Like it was like there was religious aspects to it, spiritual journey. It was something that was like super challenging, and it in a sense like brought about more questions, but in a way that made him feel more grounded too. Right. Like it was just like this, I was just like, this is like, there's people out there that have obviously been asking the questions that I had been asking for a long time.
It gave you words to your experience.
It gave me some words to my experience, and it was just like medicine to hear. So much so that I remember I was driving over 17 listening to it, and it was like Friday night. I used to commute, my company used to pay for me to live over the hill for like the work week. And then I'd come home over to Santa Cruz on the weekends, and I drove to your house. And I think we were probably all like planning on doing something that night, but I was like, have you guys ever heard of what a podcast is? And like some people kind of had like, oh yeah, like that's where they talk about
holding like your iPhone too, like it's the tablet of Messiah.
That's where they solve like murder mysteries, right?
Shane's like Moses with his iPhone. Yeah. Come hither. There's a burning bush with dimethyltryptamine. Exactly, you must all hear of it. Yeah, it's like
the British are coming.
Yeah,
the podcast are coming.
Totally.
But I remember I somehow convinced us to put it on in your living room, and we
was this at my house?
Yeah. We made like tea and like sat around the fireplace and like listened to I re-listened to it, but you guys heard it for the first time. This guy like talking about seeing like snakes and jaguars and like transcending dimensions and all this shit, and I was kind of like, well, maybe nobody's that into it. Like, I had no idea, but I also viewed it as like an opportunity to see, who amongst my friends were also like having these types of questions at various levels, but like felt like they also couldn't talk about it. And then all of a sudden we could, like Gary. I think Gary was there that night, and me and Gary now, like when we talk, it's like a podcast. Like we just go, it's like I haven't seen him in months, and we'll just chat about a couple of things, but we just go deep on like where we're at psychologically and spiritually and all that. And I mean, I'm pretty sure 6 months after we all listened to this around your fireplace, like he was in Peru, like doing the same thing, like down there. And then you, similar, like started a podcast probably a year later. But yeah, I mean, whether it like resonated on like a spiritual level or not, like it was powerful for me to like find something and like share it with people and see it like change their life.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was also right around the time that everyone was saying that our attention spans are vanishing and no one will be entertained by anything over 10 minutes long. And here you are saying, hey guys, let's sit around a fire and listen to a 3-hour long conversation.
Story.
And I remember at first being like, dude, this is going to be lame. And then 10 minutes into it, we're like, what? You're not hearing this shit anywhere else.
Exactly. That's what it was.
Else,
yeah, there was
right?
nothing like
There's nothing this honest, right? And that was the first podcast I had ever listened to, which tumbled me down my own
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. And a year later, I started my own podcast, which you made the artwork for, supported me to do that. And I consistently say that it was the best decision of my life. Mm-hmm. And it all started from you sharing that first podcast.
Yeah. And then even like listening to podcasts from that point on probably became the most educational experience I've had, like more than college for sure. And like, if you think that the, like the 5 people you hang around, spend time with the most, like you become the average of, it's like, you can definitely influence that by like your podcast downloads. 'Cause you're spending like hours with someone. Like you don't know them personally, but you get to know the way they think. And that's ultimately why you become the average of the people you spend time with. So like looking back, it was like that commute that people want to avoid at all costs was like the best thing that happened to me, in a sense. Like,
yeah. Podcasts also reward authenticity in a way that other mediums don't. So you can be fake and put on some kind of facade with Instagram or even, short form YouTube videos. Like you can fake it.
Right.
But if you're sitting down in the ring on Rogan for 3 hours, that shit's going to crack apart, right? And listeners start to become smart and become more finely attuned to what someone is actually like.
There's no ability to have a script in
totally.
that format.
And you and I have listened to probably thousands of hours of podcasts now, and we can tell if someone's being fake. We're like, I didn't like that. What was that? You might not even know what it was, but you can tell if someone is genuinely trying to deliver good information. And just talking about your own authentic experience is such a powerful and persuasive medium.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it probably has to do with there not being, like, some podcasts have live audiences and stuff, but like that podcast specifically, what really stood out was it felt like I was just in a room with 2 dudes, like just chatting about some pretty intense things. Like they weren't like putting up a facade. Rogan probably didn't even have that many viewers at that time, so it wasn't like a business, like that crazy of a business either. Like they weren't trying to make it good. They weren't trying to make it cool. They were just like being, and that was just the biggest relief, right. Content relief.
What drew you to your trip in India?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I heard that podcast. Definitely like inspired me, like want to go to Peru, want to go and experience different cultures just in general. I think what I was realizing was like there was so many different ways to live life, so many different ways to dress, so many different belief systems. What was cool, what was not cool, what was true, what was false. Like it's just so many different perspectives. And I felt very confined in my little bubble here in California. My dad, he sailed a lot when he was younger. He sailed from Seattle to the Panama Canal up through Colombia and like all around the world. And I think it was really transformative for him. And I know he saw a lot of shifts in his life. So I knew there was a point where I wanted to do something similar.
The world is a book, and those who don't travel read only one page.
Yeah. And so I had met somebody at Lightning in a Bottle that first year, actually. So the first year I went to Lightning in a Bottle, I met this woman, Jill, and didn't really think anything of it. But she was like, me and my boyfriend are starting a retreat center in Goa. My boyfriend's from India, went to San Diego State, or went to UC San Diego, became a professional kite surfer randomly. Like in India, water sports are not a big thing. We're not a big thing. It's still like way behind. And so because of that, there's not like a I guess recreational association with the ocean. It's like you use it to pull fish out of or to like poop in. Like there's nothing much else there. Like maybe some beauty, but like most people don't live on the coastline and whatnot. So because of that, the coasts and the oceans were getting trashed. And he had kind of this unique perspective being from there, but then living in San Diego and falling in love with the ocean, and then realizing what was happening to the ocean back home. And they had went to Lightning in a Bottle that year, and they saw how Lightning in a Bottle was making environmentalism or conscious festivals like cool, where like they had recycle bins and compost bins and all of these things, because they're like, you guys love this nature, you love this environment, this organic feel. This is how we preserve this. And so they're like speaking to the youth through music and art, and bringing about awareness around these things. And so he was like, we can do that in Goa, because there's a huge community down there like that's really into music. They just weren't into the ocean. And so they started this kind of retreat center where they would have musicians from Bombay and Mumbai or Bombay and Delhi fly in and like throw parties, like big DJ sets. But then also they would hold beach cleanups, and they taught surf lessons, and they taught kite surfing lessons, and they had a health food cafe. And so that all was building like after I met her. Like I was like, this is awesome, like what they're doing over there. And then they started an artist in residency. And my friend went over there and did like the first one, and they basically like put you up with a place to stay, and then you work on art, and you have an art show, and it's all part of like building art and music into the whole thing, like attracting young people to come in and integrate with, you know, having fun and appreciating expression, but also doing it in a very conscious way, which they felt like could shift culture in India, which was super needed. And so probably 3 years after I met her, I applied for their artist in residency. And previous to that, I feel like I wasn't really ready. Like when I first met her, like I said, that was like the first painting I'd ever finished. And I really wanted to expand my, like what I could do, and going into an experience where I was like going to go there for 6 months and work on an art show. So I did that, and then I applied, and they're like, yeah, you can come over 6 months. And I took a leave of absence from work, and never went back to that job. But it was amazing.
So you were painting in India.
So flew into Mumbai, then went down to Goa, and that's where their space is. It's in Ashram Beach in Goa, which is like a little, it's like a little town within this larger town, and it's like a strip of beach where it's just like, it's almost like a festival in a sense. They shut down because of the monsoon season half of the year, where they literally like take down most of the buildings. Like the buildings almost feel like like a Burning Man structure.
Whoa.
And then they build it up, and a lot of people from Russia come there. It's kind of like they're Mexico. And people from all over India come there, and there's yoga retreats, and there's big parties and festivals and everything. But a pretty big art community too. And so they put me up, like I'd never been out of the country. I'd never been, besides like Canada, Mexico, like never been off the continent. Land in India, jump in this cab, and it's just like we're dodging like cows and dogs, and this driver just has like this crazy music, like techno, like psytrance playing, but he's got like shrines like all over his front dash, and you could just tell he's just like, they're gonna keep me safe, and I'm just going for it. And he just like passing people, like it was just so intense, and I was like, oh my god, this is a different world.
Yeah,
completely different world. And he drops me off where I'm supposed to be, and it's like, it's a pretty gnarly little house. Like it's like out in this village, and it looks like it's unfinished, right? Like the whole top story, like they're kind of like, we'll do that later.
Roofs superfluous.
Yeah, and there's like the windows are just kind of like the prison grates on the windows, and there's you know, like cows walking around our yard, and like a bunch of dogs everywhere, like all over the place. And at the time, like there's no, like they dropped me off, and there's like no like Wi-Fi. I didn't even know what to do. Like I was like, I couldn't connect with the people that I was like meeting there.
Right. So you're,
like,
you're solo.
Here. And I was just like got in the house, and like the bed's there. Everything's different. Right? Like the bed, it's like 2 inches of foam, and I was like kind of sit down on it. Like, it's gonna be a long 6 months. And just like waiting it out, super jet lagged. Like also just like, it's just intense. It was just
Had you read Shantaram?
Read Shantaram.
Of course you did.
Yeah. I was like, this wasn't in the brochure.
Yeah.
But yeah, got a scooter. That was a fun experience, like getting used to that. Like I remember it was like my third night there, and I was like, the house was probably like 2 miles from the retreat center. And it was like the artist house, and there was probably like 4 other artists that were staying there. And I was riding home on the scooter, like still figuring out the ropes. It's like pitch black. There's no like street lights or anything. And the road is like a one-way road, and I come down, it's kind of dips down and then comes back up, and I come down to this dip, and I'm not kidding, like 40 dogs, and they're all sleeping. And I'm like, and there's kind of like a way like I could get through them. Just start like slowly trying to like weave through these dogs, and then like one of them like lifts his head up. He's like, and then all the dogs, dude, just jump up, and I'm like, and they're just like chasing me like so, at my side. I'm like.
On your little moped.
Scooter. Yeah. I'm like, no. I'm like yelling at them like, like, and like scare them away. Like, Jesus Christ, this is gonna happen every time.
Flicking like your paintbrush at them. Get away from me.
I was like, this is night 3. I'm like,
yeah.
Are these dogs here all the time?
Traveling can be terrifying,
so
dude. I've heard the parallel between traveling and psychedelics.
Yeah,
and I think it's very true. It shakes up your world completely.
Yeah, for sure. But I got used to it really quick.
Right.
That was like home, right? But yeah, that experience definitely shook up the snow globe, right?
Right.
Like the house I was staying at, there was people who owned the house upstairs, and it was like a traditional like Indian family, and they're awesome. Like, but we couldn't speak the same language like at all. But like it was just like cool seeing their family. They like showed me their house, and it's just like, you know, like nothing, like there's just like nothing in their house. Like it was just like a couple concrete rooms with like blankets on the floor, like
right.
that kind of thing. And the guy who owned the house, he's like the sheriff in town, but also a taxi driver. Like, you know, that kind of stuff where I was like, whoa, there's just like so many different ways that people are living life. And
when you're a kid and 9/11 happened and you felt like your sense of security and home was really shaken up, right? It seems like between that point and being in India, you built a level of spiritual durability where you weren't seeking to be someplace else. Like it seemed, from what I'm hearing, like you were pretty quickly able to shift into this new environment and be okay with where you were. You know, some people can't handle traveling. They go halfway around the world because they think it's romantic and it's going to make them, you know, more erudite and cultured, but they hate it. You know, they're like, this is not
like the real
travel, what it's really like. Yeah, exactly. So traveling is the most uncomfortable, most romanticized thing humans do, probably. But what it sounds like is from that first experience of being a kid and being totally shaken up to now you had built a kind of toolkit to readjust to an uncomfortable situation quickly.
In a sense, like I think part of it was just was almost like going into the storm. Like, right? Like I could have built a toolkit that allowed me to maybe forget or like numb myself out and not think about it would be like one toolkit that's an option when you're going through anything traumatic or like just dealing with thoughts or emotions you don't want to deal with. And then another option is being like, I'm just going to go towards that and like go towards learning about the unknown more and more and more. And so that kind of travel was like interests me like infinitely. Like I want to go to a place where it makes me think completely differently about what I do on a day to day or what I drink or what I wear, like all that. Like I want that. I want more. I almost want like more instability in my beliefs.
That's where creativity comes from.
Yeah. But like the other, I'd say the more like toolkit approach would have almost transpired less in a sense. Like it would have been like, it's all good. Like nothing's wrong. Like just kind of shove it under the rug. And after like 9/11, but after like the thing that happened with Adam or he committed suicide, at that point I was kind of like, I'm going all in. Like I'm going towards the fire.
Surrender.
Yeah. It was a surrendering a little bit. Yeah. And then but that breeds like curiosity and exploration and like this freedom where I was like, I want to go to like a place like in India. Like I loved that. Like that was amazing. Where you're just like really in this raw environment. Like it wasn't plush. It wasn't like going to a hotel in the Maldives kind of a thing. Like I was in it. And I love, that's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, you get to have a very personal conversation with yourself in difficult moments and figure out who you are and what you're capable of.
Yeah. And then you're meeting new people. You know, you don't have like your friend group to fall back on. Like I didn't know anyone there. You know, obviously not the local people, but then the people that I was even like, I'd met Jill who runs the center once, you know, And so that's also really cool because it gives you an opportunity to sort of, in a sense, like recreate yourself, or like you can ditch some of the things that maybe your environment and the people, your community kind of like holds you to. Like if people expect you to act or think or say, wear like a certain thing, going like straying away from that, it can be tougher when you're around the same people all the time. But if you're in a completely new environment, you can kind of like explore different aspects of yourself. And
Were you drinking coffee at the time?
no. I mean, let's see. They had a cafe there. So at the time that was in my like, I knew that coffee made me feel like shit. But like sometimes you're in an environment and like they would have like coffee DJ afternoon or coffee DJ mornings where they would like brew these like powerful cold brews and like everybody was like dancing and stuff, and I would like have it sometimes there. But I was really into chai. Even before going there, I loved chai, but like once I got there, I'd go to these little chai wallas, and they're amazing. Like I would just ride up the road on my scooter, and you come into the like quote unquote town. There's like a couple buildings, and there's like this little corner shop, and you go in, and it's just like a chai shop, and they give you like a shot glass almost, like it's super small, and you sit down, and it's like 10 cents, and they come by, and this guy's like brewing this huge vat of cardamom and cinnamon and cloves and ginger and black tea and tons of sugar and milk. Tastes amazing. But yeah, I would go there and get a samosa. That was kind of my little
What's
my
a
routine.
samosa?
It's like a bread. It's almost like a pastry on the outside, and has some like some meat or potatoes on the inside.
But you were on the chai program at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then did you bring that habit back to California with you?
Yeah. So when I came back, I mean, you wouldn't really want to drink a ton of chai over there, in like the traditional, because it's like drinking like a 12-ounce cup like this. It's
right.
Like,
it's intense.
it's probably like drinking like 12 Cokes or something. And there's like sugar. There's so much sugar in it.
Yeah.
But when I came home from India, I found this company called Blue Lotus Chai, and they create like a concentrate powdered chai, no sugar, all organic. And it has 1/7 the caffeine of coffee. So that was like my go-to. It kind of gave me like that tether back to that experience in India, which was amazing and really transformative for me. And then I was using chai as just a base. And when you think about, when I started to realize like coffee is just like a coffee bean, right? Like you brew a coffee bean. Chai is black tea. That's chai. Chai means tea. And then the masala part of it is just a blend of spices. And in a masala chai, traditionally like cloves, black pepper, cardamom, ginger, cinnamon. And so I was like, this is already a blend of a lot of things. Like what else can I blend in it? Cause I knew I loved waking up and drinking something every day. Like that really helped, like having this routine, the same way as like the more rituals you can bring into like your evening, like your mind start, like similar to like bringing, like the dog can hear the dog food and they're already going to be salivating. Like you're training your mind in the morning to wake up and get creative, and at night to fall asleep.
Right. Mick Fanning, the pro surfer, would always listen to the same song before heats to prime his mind and get into that zone.
Mm-hmm. And I'm huge on that too. For creativity, especially, I think it's really important. So I started to think, if I'm going to drink this mug every day before, like at that time I was working on my own company with Paul, and like I was literally trying to like build my dream, right?
You were working on MUD WTR?
No, at the time I was working on a company called Cavalry.
Okay.
It's like a tech company. But you know, we had like, when you're working on your company, you're like working on, it's like the stakes feel high because you're like, we want to build something massive, and like ultimately it comes down to you. Like there's no one else to rely on. Like you have to make it happen. And so I really felt like I needed to be at my best in order for it to succeed. So I was like, what else can I put in this? If I'm drinking this every single morning, like I can just stack other things in it, and you know, whether it's vitamins or minerals or what else could I put in? And my like podcast top 8 was like, you know, Tim Ferriss and that whole crew. And Tim Ferriss was always talking about Four Sigmatic, and Four Sigmatic at that time was like a coffee company. It was was pretty much like lion's mane coffee. And I wasn't drinking coffee, but the lion's mane component seemed perfect for what I was looking for, because it was focus and cognitive function, all these things. So I bought some lion's mane, added it to it, my chai, and I was like, chai is great for covering up things. Like the lion's mane I found like really has no flavor, but that really allowed me to explore. From there, it was just like adding different components.
Sure. Yeah, the chai overpowers the flavor of coffee. Yeah. If you try to mix the two,
right.
The coffee,
like a dirty chai,
the
sure.
coffee taste pretty much disappears.
Mm-hmm. And so I was drinking like chai with lion's mane, and I would add. I was buying like a lot of different things that I was interested in. I was like adding like bee pollen and whatever. And at that time I moved to LA, and I was working on that company. And I was hanging out with a lot of my friends from college who were from LA and moved home too. And I hadn't seen them for a long time. And in going out, in LA is like this still. Cocaine is like a hugely popular drug in LA, in most towns. And I was kind of like, I was looking at everything that I did and just asking the question why, like starting from the place of why, like whether it was good or bad, like a good habit, like why do I train jujitsu? Like, let's find out like why I like doing this. And that's going to like empower me to do it more and maybe do it with more discipline and go further in it. But then there could be something like I've tried Coke and I was like, what, like, why do I do that? And like, I didn't like my reason. So I like didn't do it anymore. Right. But
what was the reason that you did Coke? When you asked yourself the question, like, okay,
I didn't have a reason. Like, it was like, I guess I was doing it for I think there's value in like a shared sacrament amongst friends and like party environments. It doesn't even matter what it is. Like,
maybe not in the men's room.
You could have like 20 people, and like, if you're all like meditating, like you could have like this, you could get like high from it almost.
Sure.
Right?
Well, that's probably what attracted you
alcohol.
to the building of the bong.
Yeah.
More than actually smoking the weed.
Yeah, it was just, yeah, exactly.
You're building something.
Straight up. And so like a lot of the reason was that it wasn't the actual, the substance. When I was thinking like, how does it make me feel? Do I like that? It was like, sometimes you feel like you're on top of the world kind of, but like it was very artificial, and the come down was terrible. And I was like, fuck that. Like I can generate that confidence on my own. I don't need a crutch, but I understand that like I understood why I did it before and why that felt good. But ultimately I was like, understanding the why, I realized that really what I was looking for wasn't like a substance to give me that feeling. It was like looking to build that feeling on my own, right? That feeling of like confidence, and what people talk about when they do Coke is like, I feel like I conquered the world.
Let's start a business together.
Yeah, and oftentimes they're very delusional about it. So I started going out, hanging out with friends, seeing that it was pretty popular, and amongst friends who, didn't take to it when I was in college with them. I was kind of like, oh, that sucks. And I was kind of like wondering, like asking them why, and serendipitously, I came across an article about people snorting cacao in Germany, I think, as like an alternative for Coke. And they were drinking cacao too, which is now a lot more common with like cacao ceremonies. But this was 6 years ago probably. And so I bought a bag of cacao, and you can't buy like less than like a kilo of cacao. So I had like a kilo of cacao.
Picture like some like old man on a donkey, like rolling up to your studio in Venice, like giving you a huge bag. Adios, amigo.
Yeah. And so I had this kilo of cacao. And I started bringing, I would bring like I'd go out to party with my friends, and I would literally bring like a little bit of it. And my friends would come up like
a baggie of cacao.
A little baggie of cacao. I'm not kidding. And friends would be like, yo, you want a little key bump or whatever? I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, do you want some of this? And they're like, wait, why are you smoking cacao? I'm like, or why are you snorting cacao? I'm like, why are you snorting that?
Why are you snorting Coke?
We're getting these like really silly, like philosophical things, but like I really enjoyed like that questioning because like it really did help me.
Then you had like a smoke bomb that you'd like throw and disappear.
It really did.
Follow me on Instagram.
But it like really built bonds from some of my friends. Like they started like thinking about it. Like it was really cool. Like what I saw, and like I snorted cacao like kind of a lot. Like it sucks. Like,
What
it's
did it make you feel like?
Nothing really.
Nothing.
It's no fun, but it's like kind of exciting.
Sure.
And so I had,
so
you know,
funny.
just under a kilo of cacao now at the house, and I was like reading about cacao too, though. Like cacao has like, the reason why they snort it in like the article, they were saying it like gives you kind of like this mood lift and like oxytocin, like the love chemicals, and like would just make you feel good. And I'm sure part of that was just because they were doing it in groups of people, and it probably did have that effect. The same way, I've heard like people come out of cacao ceremonies, something I've actually never done, but they'll be like crying, and it's like this heart opening experience. But yeah, so I started reading about it, and there's like benefits to energy, mood, really high doses of antioxidants. And so I just started adding it to this masala chai and lion's mane that I was drinking. And I was like, that's really good. It's like a cacao, it's like a hot cocoa, spicy hot cocoa. And then I was like, what else can I add to this? Pretty much. And I added cordyceps of physical performance, and I really dislike being sick. So I added chaga and reishi, which really help with immune support. But more importantly, I feel like it helps me handle more stress, brings me into like a homeostasis. Like ultimately, both you and I, like we're taking on, like we are embarking on journeys that we know are going to give us stress, right? Like especially an athlete too, like starting a company. It's like, I know I'm going to get stressed. Stress is a great thing. It's going to empower me to grow, but like adding more or like managing that stress is super important, because that could also break you. So that's kind of where I was thinking there, and turmeric and cinnamon. And ultimately, like, I had this drink that had all these different ingredients, and I would put in a big hydro flask, and that was it. Like I didn't even tell anybody about it, because I was working remotely. I told like Paul, and he would just like heckle the shit out of me. And I brought it on like a trip we went to Colombia, and I brought it in like
Paul, the co-founder of Cavalry.
Paul now the
Joe.
co-founder of MUD WTR, and COO. But at the time, he was like a 5 cup of coffee a day drinker, like grew up in Ohio, was kind of like, like not really interested in these like foo like herbs and stuff. But like he also had like really severe anxiety as well, but like didn't attribute it to coffee at all. But I remember like in Colombia one time, I like tried to get him to try it. I was like, this is actually really good. It makes me feel amazing. He's like, not a fucking chance. Like, he like looked at it. He's like, not a fucking chance, dude. Yeah.
Looks like mud.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
But that's like kind of how I started calling it mud, just because it like he thought it looked gross. I was like, yeah, it's mud.
Lean into it.
Yeah,
Lean
went
into it.
into it. But so drinking that through that experience, Cavalry didn't end up working out, so I ended up joining a team working in an office environment again. So amongst a bunch of coffee addicts, because pretty much 9 out of 10 at least people in an office are going to be drinking coffee all the time. And I would bring this concoction in, and people were like, what the fuck is that? And I'm like, it's mud. And they're like, what the fuck is that? And I would kind of tell them, and they're like, damn, like every single time it was like, I really need to like drink less coffee. Like I've been drinking too much. It's making me feel stressed out, like all this stuff. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with like our culture where like everybody's addicted to this thing, but everybody like hates it?
Yeah.
It was like tripping.
Totally.
And so I started to like give some to people in the office.
It's like Kardashians.
It's so weird.
No one likes you. Why is everyone still paying attention to you?
Yeah, dude, exactly.
I feel like I'm on crazy pills.
Yeah. And so I started
I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore.
So I started to give it to people, and people were like, I like this. This is awesome. And I remember one time you and I, we went to the Bombay Beach Biennale, and I told you about it then, and you didn't. That was probably the first time I told you about it. And I remember I gave you like an Amazon shopping list, and you got, but you like were doing something wrong. I remember. You were like eating it or something.
Well, okay, so we were on our way to the Bombay Beach Biennale, which is this random little festival that our mutual friend Chris Ryan told us about, because he contributes to it. It's out in the middle of this spot called the Salton Sea, which is in the middle of California, and for a time was this huge tourist hub because
Bigger than Vegas, I think.
well, what happened was they had diverted some bright-idead people had diverted the Colorado River to fill up this huge. I believe it was the Colorado River. It was some huge aquifer. They diverted it to create this huge lake out in the middle of California.
Yeah.
And then a tourism industry was built around it. So they built hotels. It was this place for wealthy people to go water skiing. This was in the 50s, right? But what they didn't realize is that big stagnant pools of water can result in massive algal blooms.
Yeah.
So a few years after that, this stench descended on all of the Salton Sea.
And wasn't there agriculture runoffs coming in contributing to?
It,
Or
so
was that
it,
later?
it became this polluted toxic waste site, right? Because it is
heavy.
all around the agricultural area in
'Cause it had
California.
It had no fresh water coming in and no water leaving. So like typically, even if it had water leaving, it'd be nice. Because then you'd have like maybe some rain runoff.
It's just stagnant.
Yeah.
So you go into the Salton Sea now, and there are these old hotels that were built in the 50s that are derelict and rusted. There are ships on the edge of the beach there that have just been left.
It's apocalyptic.
It's if it wasn't,
There's like fish bones and stuff. Like,
yeah, so there's a guy named Tal Ruspoli who started the festival. He's this artist, and he says if it didn't suck so badly, it wouldn't be so great,
It's true.
right?
Yeah.
So
So
he's
hot, it's cold.
It's exactly totally, yeah. So he started this festival where he brings artists out, and they do performances once a year, and you and I went, and it's just weird and it's wild. Like they had, and it goes on sometimes, I believe, the same time as Coachella does.
Yeah, it's
Right?
March, April-ish.
It was right around that same time.
But they don't advertise it. You have to like know someone who knows when it is.
Totally. Yeah, it's very underground. They had, the year before you and I went, they had Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros play.
Yeah.
But Edward Sharpe had some kind of clause where he wasn't allowed to perform, he wasn't allowed to sing anywhere during the time of, I believe it was Coachella. So he went out on stage at Bombay Beach Biennale in some kind of like white flour all over his face,
Right.
like he was about to sing a song, and he had downed a bunch of ketchup, and he went out on stage, stuck his finger down his throat, and then just started
Like
vomiting.
Yeah. I
Like
heard
as
about that.
this kind of performance art piece of being contractually obligated not to sing.
Oh my God.
So you and
That
I,
place is so wild though.
It's-
Like because it's like a full on, like it looks like there's a lot of buildings that were half built and some that like got decapitated, but like they would build little sculptures around them, or like one would be a stage, or they had an opera house.
yeah, and you can
art
buy.
installation.
I mean, you can buy a plot of land in the Salton Sea for like $10,000 or something,
Right.
because the whole place smells like rotten eggs.
It's terrible.
Yeah,
But then
it's
there's locals there too.
there's
It's
locals
wild.
there. Yeah, there's locals. They'll show up and they're stoked because it's bringing in, people like us who wouldn't be going out to the Salton Sea without the Biennale. But yeah, I remember us going out there, you sharing mud water with me, giving me an ingredients list, and then I went and got some of that. What was it, like the Tule chai? What was it called? It started with the T.
Blue Lotus?
Blue Lotus,
Yeah.
sorry. Blue Lotus chai. I got the mushrooms, cordyceps. And what's funny is just last week, I was back at my spot in Santa Cruz clearing out some shit, and I still had some of these
those,
old
yeah.
ingredients. And then, but at that point, you had not started mud water. You
No.
were just showing
There's nothing. I mean, so
showing me what you were drinking.
yeah, and like when Cavalry wound down, so Cavalry was this tech company. We were building. It's really, really techy. It's a business to business company, so not a consumer facing brand that you'd heard of. But we were really passionate about it, Paul and I. And when it ended up not working out, it was like traumatizing. Like it was like your baby just passed away. It was like so sad. And I loved working with Paul and vice versa. So even though I joined this other company as like a lead designer there, like I was always thinking about like what was the next company, because what this next company I wanted to build and start specifically work on with Paul. Cause I think beyond like the idea or the company, what the company was creating, it was more about like what the company was like stood for and what is about. That's something that would like transcend any company that him and I were going to start, right? Like it didn't matter the product we were making. And some of those values were like really prioritizing our minds and like having fun and like experiencing life, like not building a company that you have to orient your entire life and future around in order to work for. It's like building the company that enables you to live the life you want to live was like a huge thing that we wanted to offer to like employees. Like we wanted to rethink how companies were built. And then one of the main other aspects is just leaving the world a better place than we found it. And that's something like Paul like embodies to a T, and like I really am inspired by. So yeah, I was working for this company and giving out this drink to people. This company happened to be an e-commerce tech company. Funny enough, this company actually created a tampon alternative. And I was the head designer and brought on to have like a beginner's, like obviously I had the skills to do what it was, but you'd probably think like the best fitting person would be somebody that uses the product. But ultimately I was designing the digital product experience, not like the physical actual thing, which I would have no idea about, nor would want to. But what I was able to do is look at it from a very fresh lens, and thinking through like very creative ways to communicate the value proposition where, you know, like one woman's experience with a certain product, like they have very biased opinions about what it should be or it could be or what not to do. And I was just taking like the actual data that we had and like what we wanted to present and like able to do it in a very in a way that had zero bias, obviously. Like I was just looking at it from like how to best design it, which was really an interesting experience. But e-commerce tech company, so we were working on a subscription model, and I learned a lot about direct consumer business and philosophy and design and technology and all of that, which I ended up using at MUD WTR, obviously. So it was like a year into working for this company. I was drinking this product, giving it to people in the office, and you know, dreaming up like Paul and I always called it like, what's going to take us to Nicaragua? Because before closing down Cavalry, we had this trip planned to go to Nicaragua, and we couldn't go, right? And so that was kind of like our carrot that we were thinking about. And I ended up starting to microdose here and there. And one night
with psilocybin.
And one night with a mutual friend of ours, Aaron Czar, we went to this party on this like yacht. And I didn't really drink alcohol. I don't drink alcohol too much. And at this time I was like really not drinking at all. But I added some psilocybin to my MUD water before going to the party with him. Like I was like, I've been drinking this drink. Like we should put some psilocybin in it, and like it would give us some energy. We can go to the party. So we did. We had like this amazing night. It wasn't like some visionary experience. It was just like a really fun night. And I got home. It was a Saturday, the next morning, and was like I was making this drink, and I was just like this is it. Like I had the whole vision in my head for the company. I'm not exaggerating at all. Like the whole thing was in my head that day. And I grabbed my computer and I designed the packaging, the brand, and coded a custom Squarespace website up.
Do you feel like there was some kind of download?
Kind of.
Like, was that one of those jolting experiences where it was coming in from somewhere else?
A little bit. Like, it was very similar to like when I watched John Park paint, you know, at the Do Lab, kind of a feeling like where it wasn't like my idea. Really, it felt like from within me in this strange way, for sure. But then there was also a factor of like I was working for this company with a lot of people, and like I like was super inspired to not have to answer to anybody and just to work on like something that was just like my own, similar to like an art piece. So I was like applying sort of like this art, like creative mentality of creating a painting towards like a business. And it felt like I was just like unleashed, like the chains were off, and I didn't have any like second guessing. Like this wasn't like a whiteboard, like, is this the target market? And like, what color should it be? What resonates with this? It was just like I knew what to do intuitively, in a very profound way. And because of that, like it just happened really fast. And like I'm not kidding in that like at the end of that day, I sent Paul like a URL, and I was like, check this out. He's like, is that fucking drink you tried to get me to drink in Colombia? I was like, yeah. He didn't get it really at the time, but he was like, all right, whatever. And I ordered, like, I didn't have a formula yet. Like, I knew what I was drinking. I knew the ingredients in it, but I didn't have it like broken down into like this many grams of each ingredient goes into that and for a serving, which is very like tech startup style, like very lean startup. So I was like applying some of the things in the tech industry where it's just like move fast, break things, get it out there and test and learn and continuously iterate. So something that like we always strive for at MUD WTR is like speed. Like speed, you're going to make mistakes, but like as long as you're consistently fast, you're going to recover from your mistakes also fast. So net, like your speed is high. So put it online, and I posted an Instagram post like the following Monday, I think, something around there. It was like May 14th. And it was just like a stock image because I didn't have product to photograph yet. Like I didn't have anything. So I found like just like a cool like picture of like someone like looking up at the sky or something like that. And it's like, where we're going, there are no ceilings. It was like something like that. But I had ordered basically just 4x the order that I usually placed on Amazon for these same exact ingredients that I normally would get. And I found these jars that had this really cool hexagon shape. And I could use the panes of the shape to put the label on. And so I ordered some labels, and they all arrived within like 4 days. And that was kind of it. And like that Instagram post went out, and I think I maybe sent it. I sent some to Chris Ryan once I got my hands on some. But it like started to get some orders just kind of organically. Started like using hashtags and commenting on different things, and like applying what I knew. Like I reached out to every single person that ordered, and like, it's like, how'd you find us? Like, what do you like? I'm excited to hear what you think. Kind of like opening dialogues up. And that really pays off. Like it takes time, but it builds. And then I took the mentality of like, I knew, so I didn't personally have any financial savings. Like I had like $1,000 in like Bitcoin. That was like it. I in fact had debt, a little bit of debt, which was in hindsight should have been more concerning than it was. I was like, I can do this, it's fine. I opened a credit card up that had like a $5,000 limit, and that allowed me to buy, like, I was like, cool, I have that, and I think I'll be able to get it off the ground. But I knew once I started the company, like I had to continuously grow every month from that. Like I couldn't like start the company and ease into it. Like I'm not that type of person in general. Like once I have an idea, like I can't sleep until it's like I'm out there doing it, like it's happening. My dad's the exact same way. But for like fundraising and stuff like that, it's really important to paint an amazing picture to an investor. Like you think about when you're designing like anything, it could be an in-person store or like an online store. Like you think about like every step is like potential friction for that customer to stop, think, not purchase it, or like get confused and overwhelmed, whatever. So like similarly, when you're raising money, you want to create a very similar frictionless story of like, I had this idea and I'm fucking all in, and here's the proof.
Right.
And so I started it like that, and I started tracking like every important metric in a spreadsheet. Like every week I was trying to beat it. At that time I was looking at weekly revenue, weekly subscribers, weekly customers, weekly everything, and just trying to improve on everything and learn.
One of the best pieces of advice you ever gave me was when I was prepping for the comedy show, the Motherfucker Awards, and you said, think about the experience of someone from the moment they show up at the door to the moment that they leave.
Yeah,
and don't
like walk through it.
Walk through every single moment that person's going to have.
Mm-hmm. And think about like, there's always opportunities where you can create like an emotional engagement. Like in our first box, like we didn't have to like add stickers and things, but like I put in a sticker that said "fuck your coffee" in it. And that was to create like an emotional reaction. And we've talked about this before, but like that statement's inspired by things that I started seeing at Burning Man, where there's like fuck your burn, fuck your art car, like anything that somebody might find some egoic like attachment to, like fuck that. Like you're getting too caught up in it. Shake up that snow globe, continue doing it, but like don't have that like unconscious like ego relationship.
Right. Those who are offended should be offended more often.
Yeah.
Right. You're just jolting them, and sometimes the power of the word can allow you to jolt someone out of their sleep.
Yeah.
Whatever it
like
is.
If you can't drink coffee without somebody saying that coffee is not cool anymore, you probably shouldn't drink coffee.
Right.
You know, like that's pretty much all I was trying to do there. Like I'm not saying don't drink coffee. Like in fact, like you should, like if it's good for you, like do it. But do it in a conscious way.
Yeah.
And do it despite me saying fuck your coffee.
Yeah.
That's great. But yeah, so I started doing that early on. Once I finally got product, I posted a photo of the product, which was like, this is when it started to happen. I posted this like stop animation rotating image of this tin or of this glass jar that we had. And it said, we're not mad at coffee, we're just disappointed. So we made something better. And that really like outlined our part of our like voice, kind of like a character, like it outlined like our character, like our style, but also like drew the line in the sand that like if you ever were the type of person like I was that had like a relationship to coffee that you wanted to change, like whether that was quit altogether or drink less, like we're a company for you. Like we speak that language and we're creating a product that's specifically serving that. Which at that time, and still, I mean, there's more and more companies coming out and kind of using that, but like at that time, like nobody was doing that. Like every tea company or every, it was all like about coffee, right? Like every cafe, it was like coffee forward, really. There's very few like tea locations, that you can go to. And so that started just to get traction. I mean, I was doing it. I was doing all the design, branding. I was at that time mixing the product. I was working full time still, but we didn't have a ton of orders yet. And I had roommates at the time. So like they were like just tripping because I would get like all these like powders shipped to the house, and like I would come home from work and like mix product until like late at night with like this commercial mixer. And there's like,
this is in your kitchen.
So I moved out in July of that house, and I was kind of cleaning some stuff up, and I got up on this ladder to remove this painting, and on the top of all of our cabinets it was just like a layer of mud. Like it was insane, dude. Like it was so bad. I have a photo of it. It's so funny. But they were just like super supportive, and one of my roommates,
you should have done a little finger painting and said the beginning.
Yeah. Mud was here.
Yeah. Started from the ceiling. Now we're here.
Yeah. Yeah. But like the coordinates on the tin, you know?
That
like
was all
right
from
there.
your house.
Yeah.
So on the mud water tin, there's coordinates on it, which is where you started it in your house.
Mm-hmm. And so it just started to get more and more orders. We had, like, I remember I went to Lightning in a Bottle that year. I was live painting. And I remember bringing like the first couple batches out there. And I was like drinking it. And one morning I woke up and it was just like orders were coming in, you know, like we got like, at the time it's like nothing, but like we had like 40 orders that day, and I was like, oh shit, what happened? And Chris Ryan had posted it on his feed, and it was like, kick today in the dick was like his coffee mug, and it had like a photo of the little collateral piece that I put in the shipper box. But like little did he know, like I write, there's a lot of typos in my writing. Yeah. And
I know Shane,
he's an
I'm
author,
really
and there's like people commenting like, you're an author, and he spelt like they wrong. Like, it was ridiculous. And I was like, oh fuck, but he kept it on, and I was like, legend. And I owe that guy big time. But like little things like that are just like little rocks that start to roll down the hill, and they build up and turn into an avalanche. And like I started to learn about Facebook advertising, and like advertising is like for a company, it's kind of like a privilege in the sense that like you can only advertise if it works. Like if you're losing money on every ad, like, it doesn't work. But like I found some ads that like worked amazing, and we started to advertise. We started just like I just would take my credit card statement and put it towards that and pay it off slowly. And I kept having to increase my spending limit over the next like couple months, but it got to the point where my roommate, Sarah, she was kind of like leading a team of like actors and models that would come over, because you're in LA and there's all these people that have like strange contract jobs and they have tons of time on their hands. And
what do you
I
do?
was paying cash.
What do you do? I'm an actor. Which restaurant?
Yeah, exactly. And so they were coming over like while I was going to the office, and then I'd come home on my lunch breaks and they would like have prepared like Santa Claus bags of like boxes with labels on them that need to go out. And I would go take them to the post office, and then I'd go back to the office and work, and then come home and make a bunch of powder everywhere and make a bunch of bins, and they would package them up the next day. And it was like this amazing, it was really cool just to like see everything start to come together. Like it felt like there was a win in our sales. Like any roadblock, we just kind of kept going and going and going. And that's where Paul started to get involved.
Right. But there was this, like, you're at this point now where, I mean, at that point where you're getting orders coming in, money's going out.
And not only orders, it was like amazing testimonials from people too, which is super important. Like you can get people to buy a product. You can get people to buy the idea of a product, but then do you actually give them what they thought? Like, do you meet their expectations? And that's something that Paul encouraged me to do, is just reach out to every single person. And like I said, I was doing it at the beginning, and then later it was like there's more and more people, right? But I was getting like these testimonials that were proving what is called like product market fit, where you have a product that is appealing to a market, and that market ideally would be sizable enough to build a business around, right? That's something that investors are always looking for. And so at that time is when Paul was like, like you might got something, you might got something here. And he was sort of like became my like therapist, because starting a business like that, it's like you're just like kind of jumping off a cliff and like trying to build like plane wings, like as you're falling. And like he helped me through a lot of that. And cause he's done it before a couple of times and we've done it together. And then he was helping me a lot on the business side. So I think like what really what helps us work well together is that our skill sets are really complementary.
Right. Well, let's finish it off on this problem that you're trying to solve, and we can get into this next episode. But you had money coming in, you had money going out.
Lots of money going out.
Lots of money going out. And there was this point where you needed to decide, this was a point where you were, still working at your other job.
Yeah. So like right at this point is when I was like, there's definitely momentum here. There's something here. There's not enough. The goal for me at that point was to build it up, prove that I was the person to be behind this company, and this company deserved to exist in a way that an investor would give us capital that would allow me to work on it full time and like prove that out further. But like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of things that go into that relationship of like finding somebody to believe in you on that point. So 3 months in, like I wasn't quite there yet. Like it was fun and amazing. We were growing. There's something there, but I still needed to prove out some things, like both on revenue numbers, testimonials, and customer size and subscription model. And so, yeah, it was kind of like that 3 month mark was like an inflection point where I was like, all right, like I'm going to push hard for the next, like, I didn't know how long it was going to be, but hopefully for enough, because I couldn't quit my job. Like I couldn't leave my job or else I wouldn't be able to fund the company. I took out the little savings I had in Bitcoin and like put that in and kept getting that credit card larger. But like I knew at some point the credit card was going to be maxed out. My time was going to be maxed out, but I wasn't going to be able to quit my job because I didn't have money. So I knew that was like an eventual looming cliff that was coming. And I was hoping that I was going to get to an investment before that. But we'll see what happens next.
So we just went through almost 20 years of your life in this episode 1.
Almost 30.
Almost 30?
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, that was probably it was like about 30.
So in that moment when you took a huge bong hit and you were freaking out, if Shane today could stand before the Shane at age 14 and say one thing to him, what would he say? Other
people have experienced this before. Like You're not alone in that, which is like something so commonly said, but it's literally like the most healing thing you can hear at that time. And to be able to understand that would be what I would want. Like somebody telling you that is a lot different than like feeling that comfort. But that would allow me to probably suffer a little bit less. And like there's always going to be the discomfort of the unknown. And I think what I've realized more recently is that like that's like what I want. That's like comforting almost now. I'm like when you go into it, but I think when you resist it is when it becomes very like uncomfortable and unbearable. And at that time it was like I wanted to go back and take apart the bong and not smoke it. You can't go back. You couldn't fight it. And so instead I over time was able to and essentially like leverage it as a positive trait of exploration. And yeah, if I could go back and say one thing, and probably just help remove some of the suffering of that insecurity around that. But maybe that was all part of it too. So I don't know.
Shane Heath, thank you so much. And I am honored to be on this journey with you, brother.
Hell yeah. It's going to be a fun one.